What's a secret that you think would shock everyone if it came out? Story 1. That nobody is actually in control. It's completely true, yet most people never recognize it. The people in power are mostly just figuring things out as they go. They act in their own self-interest, handle problems one at a time, and hope nothing blows up. There's no master plan, no grand design, just regular people, like you and me, doing their jobs and quietly worrying that someone might someday realize they don't fully know what they're doing. Nobody truly understands how the whole system functions, only that it keeps moving as long as each group sticks to what it's supposed to do. Story 2. How much information the US government tracks and keeps about us permanently. I'll keep this short, but it's honestly terrifying. As a teenager, I was kind of a troublemaker and got into legal issues a lot. I met with a counselor every week, and he happened to be close friends with the head of juvenile punishment in my county. One day, I called him out after he claimed he could find out anything about me. To prove it, he called his friend and told me to stay silent so he'd think he was alone. He asked, "Hey, how much do you know about X?" And without hesitation, the guy listed every detail. My friends, my address, my nicknames, where I hung out during the week and weekends, which websites I visited, what school I went to, and even the school I planned to attend. Literally everything was known. After the call, my counselor gave me a look like, "See?" Then he said, "There's a database that gathers information on every person in the country. No matter how carefully you think you hide anything illegal, you'll be exposed eventually. Honestly, the police probably already know, they're just waiting for the right moment. True privacy doesn't really exist anymore." Story 3. It's not exactly a secret, but the level of corruption inside the Secret Service is insane. The stuff they've done is so cartoonishly evil that people think you're crazy if you talk about it without showing them proof. But they literally admit to things like MK Ultra and Operation Midnight Climax on their own government websites. Midnight Climax involved one-way mirrors in illegal brothels where unsuspecting men were dosed with heavy drugs, then monitored while sleeping with prostitutes, all while tripping violently with zero warning. They photographed them, recorded them, and counted on the fact that none of these guys would ever go public because they were already doing something illegal. Absolutely terrifying. And this is what our tax dollars were used for. Story 4. People talk non-stop about how they are tracking you and collecting all your data. But the truth is, you're not that important as an individual. No one cares about you specifically. It's the large-scale data that matters. To them, we're statistics, not unique people, except to the small number of people actually in our lives. You obviously haven't done anything they dislike. Some argue that's only true if you've never crossed a line. They point out how whenever something major happens, some tragedy or violent event, the official story always follows the same pattern. Someone went mentally ill and attacked people. It repeats again and again, yet the narrative never changes. The idea that someone might snap after feeling harassed, watched, or messed with, that possibility never gets acknowledged. It's always pinned on sudden mental illness, even when there's no real history of it. Story 5. Years ago, I was riding the elevator talking with my neighbor, an older white woman. She asked what I did, and back then I sold appliances. She told me she used to be a nurse for the head of a major appliance company. On his deathbed, he confessed that all the top executives from the biggest appliance brands met and agreed their machines were lasting too long. Back in the day, they'd run for decades, and it was hurting sales. So they collectively decided to make them break down sooner, so people would have to buy replacements more often. I was completely shocked. I wish I'd written down the details at the time, but the whole story is basically lost now except for that conversation. Story 6. There aren't nearly as many narcissists out there as people claim. They absolutely exist, but somehow everyone insists they've dated one. Working in behavioral health, this drives me crazy. At this point, I mentally dismiss most of the online claims about narcissist exes. Odds are you didn't date a narcissist, you just dated someone you weren't compatible with. People are allowed to want different things just like you are. That doesn't make them uniquely selfish. Just move on. If you need to slap a serious personality disorder label on someone just to feel better about the breakup, that's pretty awful. And when everyone keeps insisting they've dated a narcissist, it completely drowns out the people who actually have dealt with the real thing. Story 7. I believe the Austrian Empire intentionally revived the Greater Serbia narrative to stir conflict among Croats, Serbs, Slovenians, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. They feared that if we united, we'd become strong enough to challenge them. The original book promoting the idea was buried by the Serbs themselves when it was first published, but later it turned into an ideology claiming Serbs should dominate Croats in Bosnia. That eventually led to the formation of the Black Hand, which sent Gavrilo Princip to assassinate the crown prince and pin the blame on Croatia and Bosnia, an act that sparked World War I. Story 8. I think we have about 15 to 20 years before climate change causes a complete economic collapse, dragging most of civilization down with it. Insurance markets, housing, and coastal cities will fall apart. The largest migration in human history will begin as the global south becomes unlivable, putting impossible pressure on governments worldwide. Add global famine triggered by climate instability, and it's basically an apocalypse scenario. It won't be sudden, just a gradual rise in violence, prices, and chaos, until one day the lights don't turn on and the stores are empty. At this point, there's nothing we can do. The carbon released decades ago has already pushed us toward unstoppable feedback loops that will raise global temperatures by more than 4 degrees Celsius. No miracle tech is going to save us. The only ones preparing are the wealthy elite, hoarding resources and building fortified compounds like something out of Mad Max. Most people don't care or pretend not to. Well, keep living normally, posting memes about disasters and tragedies until the day we can't. Story 9. I think a lot of science, especially the soft sciences, is filled with inaccuracies. It's relatively easy to get funding for a study with a new idea, but confirming previous results is hard. If your replication contradicts the original study, it doesn't settle anything unless more follow-ups are done. If you confirm it, you're sharing credit instead of getting attention for something new. So departments are incentivized to chase flashy, novel studies instead of solid replication. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it warps the whole system. Between flawed pop science studies designed to go viral and academic incentives pushing researchers in the wrong direction, we're at real risk of losing credibility. Story 10. One of the 100 largest companies in the US has a C-suite that is completely unhinged. They constantly come up with ideas that would bankrupt the business within a year, doubling prices on their most popular products, trying to spend billions automating things that can't be automated, screwing over customers with absurd exclusivity deals, and more. The only reason these plans never get implemented is because one department head in a critical division keeps stopping them. As the only high-level person who isn't a yes man hoping to replace the CEO someday, I won't name the company, but everyone has heard of it, even though most people have no idea what they actually do unless they work in certain industries. Most Americans have probably used their products without realizing it. If this one manager retired, the ripple effects would be enormous, reading people across the country who don't even know the company exists. My friends who have worked there say the rejected ideas were genuinely catastrophic. Story 11. The UFOs recovered over the last century have already been reverse engineered, and the physics behind them has been rewritten, but all of it is locked inside the aerospace defense world, completely cut off from academic physics at places like Harvard, Yale, and MIT. What might be the biggest secret on Earth changes everything we know about gravity and how to tap into the endless energy of space-time. If any of it were applied outside military projects, it would reshape the entire global economy and fundamentally change how humans live. Right now, the average person works endlessly because we're trapped in a debt-based, scarcity-driven system. But in reality, every person on the planet could have access to food, water, energy, transportation, and education at almost no cost, and the basic cost of living wouldn't consume their entire life. Story 12. There are several technologies that US police intentionally don't use because they would catch far more offenders than the system could handle. Facial recognition. An officer could take a suspect's security photo, compare it against driver's license databases, then cross-reference other systems for a near-instant ID. But most departments block this from everyday officers, license plate readers. Cities have LPR cameras at busy intersections, and agencies can even subscribe to private LPR networks. These systems immediately alert police about stolen cars, carjacking suspects, or wanted vehicles. If that constant flow of data were given to patrol officers, arrests and vehicle pursuits would skyrocket. DNA testing. Technically, DNA can be taken at almost any crime scene, but it's usually reserved for major cases because it's expensive. New tech makes testing cheaper and easier, but it's still kept limited. Persistent aerial surveillance. Baltimore ran a program where a plane filmed a 5-mile area non-stop. When a crime happened, investigators could rewind the footage and follow the suspect's path. The project was shut down after public outrage. Story 13. There's a scientifically grounded method for communicating with non-physical intelligences through states of deep gnosis, allowing people to uncover profound truths about existence. The core principles behind this are becoming more understood every generation, and they're approaching a tipping point where they'll enter everyday knowledge. As humanity refines its language, symbolism, and understanding of the mind, ideas once labeled occult slowly become mainstream, just like how alchemy turned into chemistry and natural philosophy became science. Magic can now be described as the art and science of shaping events in the universe according to one's will. These principles reveal that the individual is the highest unit of spiritual measurement. Humanity sits between the physical and spiritual worlds, a creature of both. Authority no longer comes from tribal rules or rigid dogma. Instead, the inner genius of each person becomes the guiding force. There is no law beyond doing what your will calls you to do. None of this is hidden, it's been developing for over a century. We're simply nearing the moment where the collective mindset of humanity shifts toward a new spiritual direction, centered on individual expression rather than systems built on obedience. Story 14. Most commercial airplanes operate with a surprising number of broken or malfunctioning parts, and you still fly on them. As long as the aircraft is considered safe and functional, it stays in service. Bacteria live everywhere on and inside us, and they strengthen our immune systems. The extreme cleanliness obsession during the pandemic and products marketed to kill all bacteria often caused more harm than good. Fun fact, our bodies have roughly a 1.1 ratio of human cells to bacterial cells at this very moment. Most labels like organic, hormone-free, or non-GMO are marketing buzzwords designed to appeal to health trends. Ask anyone in the industry and they'll tell you how meaningless many of those labels are. Same goes for most vitamin supplements. Doctors will tell you the majority of people don't need them, outside a few specific deficiencies. Story 15. The U.S. Federal Witness Protection Program doesn't actually protect witnesses the way movies portray. They'll give you a new identity, new documents, and a very small amount of money to relocate, but that's it. There's no ongoing protection, no guards, no steady payments. You still need a job and have to support yourself like anyone else. What's even worse is that WITSEC staff have been known to give a witness new identity and location to members of criminal organizations if those criminals agree to exchange information about their leaders or rival groups. It's not unheard of taking down a superior can help them move up the chain. It's nothing like the movies. It's a much colder system in real life. Story 16. UAP or UFO disclosure is getting strange. More and more insiders are saying these craft and their pilots aren't extraterrestrial at all. The term NHI non-human intelligence keeps getting used, which implies something far different. The idea is that these beings likely originated on Earth, and whatever the truth is, people who know won't share it. Whatever they're hiding is clearly disturbing and could shake the foundations of our entire civilization. Maybe they're another intelligent species that evolved long before humans, something reptilian or insect-based. Or they could be humans from the far future, evolved into the classic gray alien form. Or they might not be from our reality at all, but from another dimension entirely, something like heaven or hell. Whatever they turn out to be, the public will be stunned when it finally comes out, even if the explanation ends up being just advanced foreign tech. Story 17. Not only is intelligent, advanced extraterrestrial life real, but we've known about them for decades and we've even tried making contact. But it's nothing like movies. We know they're there, they've been watching us for a long time, and any attempt we've made to reach out has either been ignored or destroyed. They're far beyond us in every way and simply observing. It's like being a fish in a tank, aware of the glass, aware that something powerful is watching from outside, but having no clue what that being will do or why it's watching at all. Story 18. Most people still don't realize that nearly all money is created out of thin air by banks and the government. You face real consequences when you don't have it. You need those numbers to live, while someone at a financial institution can type huge sums into existence with barely any connection to labor or actual assets. Your whole life is spent working for an amount that is tiny in the grand scheme, while a banker writes a number into a ledger far larger than what you'll ever see. It exists only because they have the power to declare it real. Story 19. Public understanding of climate change doesn't match how severe the situation actually is, not even close. If people really knew how bad things were, everything about society would shift overnight. Every article saying it's worse than expected, faster than expected gets brushed off with, yeah, they said that last time. But the reality is that climate change is accelerating exponentially, and we don't notice because we only see the results after they've compounded, like waking up one day and realizing the grass has grown, even though you never saw it growing. One morning, we'll get a headline or a disaster that finally makes everyone realize how deep the hole is, but by then, it'll be too late. Story 20. I work for a casino-style company that installs slot machines in bars or restaurants and gaming lounges. One sad secret of the industry is how the economy affects where the money comes from. When times are good, wealthier areas perform well. But when the economy crashes like the last few years, it's the poorest neighborhoods that suddenly generate the most profit. People get desperate and hope gambling will fix their problems, and then addiction steps in. I remember a woman who won $1,600, thrilled because it would help her cover overdue bills. I thought she'd cash out and leave. Instead, she kept playing until it was gone. It's an industry built on people's addictions, and that's why it never suffers in a recession. Story 21. I work in warehousing, and the amount of plastic is unreal. Even companies that brag about being green or selling plastic-free products are only plastic-free at the consumer level. The supply chain definitely isn't. I once read something like, a car mirror is made in India, wrapped in plastic and shipped to Kentucky. A circuit board from China, also wrapped in plastic, gets added. The whole thing is wrapped again and sent to Japan for a motor. More plastic, then back to Kentucky for the outer housing. Then it's wrapped and shipped to Pakistan to add bolts. Wrapped again and sent to Turkey for wiring. Wrapped again and shipped to Indiana to attach to the finished car. And finally covered in more plastic before heading to Texas to be sold. Not the exact quote, but the idea is the same. Modern logistics is just endless layers of plastic and global shipping for the cheapest labor at each step. Story 22. It's not really a secret, but after years working in both public and private schools, I learned how often serious student issues get handled in the worst way. Victims get blamed, told to stay quiet, or even expelled because it's an easier solution than addressing the real problem. If you're kind to students and actually try helping them, you'll be told not to, because protecting the school's reputation matters more than acknowledging what's wrong. I've heard administrators say awful things about kids, especially disabled kids. I quit more than once because of it. Story 23. Leftover cafeteria food can't legally be given out, though the cool lunch ladies ignore this rule. I worked at a school where huge bags of perfectly good food were thrown out if the lunch count was off. I wasn't even allowed to take it home for my chickens or pigs. I may have done some dumpster diving after hours. That year, my chickens looked like linebackers, and my freezer was full of burgers and pizza rippers. The heartbreaking part is knowing some kids go home and won't eat again that night, but federal rules say we can't give them leftovers. Story 24. When a fast food chain says its burgers are made from 100 American beef or 100 Canadian beef, it's completely true, but there's a catch. They don't tell you the grade of that beef. A lot of it comes from old, retired dairy cows, the lowest grade still allowed for food service. Imagine the difference between the firm muscle of a 20-year-old's body versus the sagging muscles of someone in their 80s. That's basically the difference between standard beef and meat from retired dairy cows. It's so soft and unstructured that it can't really be sold as roast, so it gets ground up and turned into cheap fast food patties. Story 25. When selling your house, disclose everything. Home inspectors don't just eyeball things. We use moisture meters to check for leaks under sinks, around toilets, and behind shower walls when possible. If something's wrong, well, find it unless it's purely cosmetic. Don't claim you replaced the electrical system if there's still knob and tube wiring. Some inspectors noted that you can't always identify old wiring without opening walls. So many reports include disclaimers for older homes unless there's proof of a permitted electrical upgrade. Story 26. Anything at the intersection of healthcare and IT is a mess. The computer in the ER lobby, it hasn't installed an update in 6 months because rebooting it is considered too risky. The MRI scanner taking images of your brain is probably running Windows 98 and still connected to the internet because the vendor stopped providing updates decades ago. The exam room computer you're sitting next to might get patched once a month if you're lucky. Even the internal pages doctors use to check someone's status send data unencrypted, so anyone with average tech skills within a few miles could intercept sensitive patient info. In healthcare, patient safety always comes first, and that means IT is often dead last. As long as something works, updates get delayed for years because taking anything offline could theoretically harm someone. The bare minimum security standards are usually just enough, but if a hacker ever found a way in, they could do catastrophic damage. Story 27. If you call customer service, just keep it simple. I was charged a late fee, can you reverse it? We don't need a 3-page backstory. We don't care why you need something fixed, and yelling doesn't help. If you're rude and the system won't let me do something, I'm only doing the bare minimum my job requires. If you're nice, I might throw in the maximum rewards or perks I'm allowed to offer, and thank you for being patient. Screaming at customer service because the system won't allow, Something is like yelling at the White House gardener over a law Congress passed. You feel better, but nothing changes except now you've wasted time and strained your voice. Story 28. Most recycled plastic doesn't get turned into new bottles. It gets turned into other products like umbrellas, jackets, bags, furniture, and random household items. And where do those things end up when people get rid of them? Right back in the landfill. Recycling companies have basically convinced the public to wash, sort, and collect plastic for them for free under the idea of saving the environment. But in reality, they're using a free labor force to gather materials that mostly still end up as trash. It's a clever scam dressed up as eco-friendly. Story 29. I worked in pest control for years, and people were always surprised that technicians need individual licenses from the Department of Agriculture. It's the only way we're legally allowed to handle or apply most chemicals. Inspectors will drive around doing random spot checks. Someone can walk up while you're doing paperwork, flash a badge, and ask to see your license, paperwork, and how you store chemicals in your truck. Sometimes they'll even follow you to a job and watch how you apply treatments. It's much more regulated than people think. Story 30. A close relative of mine ran for governor and lost, and the things he told me were wild. Lawfare. Opponents file endless lawsuits against you. You either hire lawyers or lose by default, and either way you get drained financially. Fake endorsements. Anyone can pretend to represent an organization and publicly endorse a candidate to distort public perception. False appearances. People will announce you're showing up at an event you never planned to attend. When you don't appear, the public gets angry and you take a PR hit even though it was never your event in the first place. Story 31. I've worked for large companies involved in government contracting, and the bidding process is a complete illusion. It's far more about politics and personal relationships than choosing the right subcontractor. People are catching on to this with military contracts, but it's the same for everything. IT, construction, services, all of it. Sure, there are rare exceptions, but I've sat in countless off-the-record meetings where the person writing the RFP asks a company president exactly what requirements to include so only that company can qualify. Most of the time, it's because they used to work together, golf together, or have some kind of mutual back-scratching deal in place. Story 32. Years ago, before Detroit declared bankruptcy and long before the deep audits, I worked as a sysadmin for Wayne County, mostly in the treasurer's office. The amount of underworking was unreal. Detroit absolutely had money, it just never reached the city. Everything funneled upward. It wasn't unusual to see a city officer with a staff of 80 people underneath them, all family, friends, or people with connections. When investigators arrived, those 80 employees suddenly dropped to 25. That really happened. Every deal approved by a politician had strings attached. Most were arranged years ahead of time and structured to benefit a person or partner company, not the city. As an example, a new jail was approved years ago, long before the site was even fenced off. One of those 80 staffers made a $5 million IT and networking deal before the ground was touched. That was 7 years ago. The project later stalled during bankruptcy. The money vanished and the project lead conveniently left before the investigation. There's more, but that's enough. Story 33. I grew up in DC, and after school I'd go to the Rayburn House office building and do homework in a senator's office. I still talk politics with my dad, so over the years I've picked up some strange bits. Mothers Against Drunk Driving actually started as a political hit job in California in the 80s. One candidate had a drunk driving incident in his past, so the opposition found a random mother and had her claim she belonged to a group called MAD to attack him. It worked, it gained traction, someone made a movie, politicians got on board, and the whole organization grew from there. Groups like the NAACP have lobbied to keep mixed race off many government forms, so people feel forced to choose one race. There's a small push to change this, but it hasn't gotten far. FEMA after Katrina was worse than people think. In one case, a large group of convicted abusers ended up in the same temporary housing as a bunch of unattended kids for months. A friend of mine in the Secret Service once claimed he accidentally walked in on Bill and Monica, but didn't report it because they're not supposed to document that kind of thing. I've got more, but that's enough for now. Story 34. Before 9/11, I worked on a losing presidential campaign. We rented a park for a rally, and the Secret Service didn't care about political optics, just safety and law enforcement. Because it was a public park, we couldn't ban anti-candidate signs due to First Amendment protections. Since we couldn't restrict content, we restricted all signs for safety reasons, then handed out our own signs after security. One guy got through wearing a shirt opposing our candidate. We couldn't remove him since he wasn't breaking the law, so I had 6 big union painters surround him and chant for our candidate until he left on his own. Nobody ever noticed him. Story 35. I was involved in a Republican U.S. Senate campaign within the last 6 years. A major GOP problem in statewide races is winning by huge margins in suburbs and rural areas, but losing by even larger margins in inner cities. My team was tasked with fixing that for our candidate. The strategy we developed was to hire very obviously cross-dressing individuals to wear our Democratic opponent's shirts and hand out his flyers outside black churches on Sunday mornings. Those congregations vote heavily Democratic, but they're often extremely socially conservative. The idea was they wouldn't necessarily vote for us, but they definitely wouldn't vote for someone whose supporters behaved in a way they saw as deviant. We made the mistake of telling our candidate the plan. He shut it down immediately. He lost by a narrow margin, and honestly, I still think it would have worked.